Assalamu alaikum. It's always a pleasure to share the most inspiring and informative stories about Muslims and Islam globally. Thoughts and questioning revolving around the presence, activities, or status of Muslims in and around Ukraine are common, especially if the current situation is considered. Are there Muslims in Ukraine? What's their status? How are they faring? Stick around for more, inshallah. Ukraine, the second largest country by land area in Europe, second to Russia, is a former member state of the Soviet Union, a former European powerhouse. But before forming part of the Soviet Union in 1921, Ukraine was an independent country for a short period between 1918 to 1920. Religions in Ukraine. Ukrainian are largely non-religious. Nearly half of the population belongs to this group. For the religious ones, the majority of them follow the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and they constitute almost another half of the 44 million population, followed by Catholicism and Christianity. Islam, even though not a majority religion, is practiced by over 500,000 people in Ukraine, with the majority in the Crimea region. History of Islam in Ukraine. Islam in Ukraine did not result majorly from immigration like many would assume. Islam has been part of Ukrainian history for centuries before the advent of the 20th century independent Ukraine. Muslims in Ukraine are largely made of Crimean Tatars from the Crimea region. Many of them moved into other cities in Ukraine during the 2014 annexation of Crimea region by Russia due to persecution. Who are the Tatars? The Tatars were an exotic nomadic tribe settled around northeastern Mongolia as early as the 5th century. They formed an integral part of Mongolia founder Genghis Khan's invasion army. Genghis Khan held several invasion campaigns in the 13th century, conquering territories now known as Eastern Europe, particularly the territory known then as Kievan Rus, now Ukraine and Russia, until the disintegration of the Khan Empire. After the collapse of Genghis Khan's empire, the Tatars formed a strong social bond, establishing their base in western Mongolia into eastern Russia. They became known as Golden Hordes. The strong bond helped them hold their ground against the rapidly growing Moscow powerhouse, which made several attempts to conquer them. The Golden Hordes converted to Islam in the 13th century during the reign of Uzbek Khan, who led his people to the rapidly growing Islam at the time. The details of what or who influenced this decision are, however, sketchy. The new Muslim Golden Hordes empire did not last long, as internal differences caused it to disintegrate into its different components and territories in the 14th century. The disintegration weakened the erstwhile strong Tatar Empire. They parted ways and were easily absorbed by the established empires. Most of them became part of the Russian Empire, including the Crimean Tatars based at the peninsula adjacent to the Black Sea of Avars. The Tatars in Crimea continued to rule the peninsula till the 16th century. Towards the end of the 16th century, Catherine the Great annexed the Crimea territory, whose only land border was Ukraine, into the growing Russian Empire. In 1922, a treaty between Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Transcaucasian states modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan formed a union officially known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, otherwise known as the Soviet Union unofficially. The small Crimea Republic was absorbed into the USSR. Exile of the Muslim Tatars by Joseph Stalin. In 1944, the Muslim Crimean Tatars in the Crimea Republic were exiled to Uzbekistan, a USSR member state, at the behest of Joseph Stalin, the premier of the Soviet Union at that time. As part of an ethnic transfer exercise, the exile saw hundreds of thousands of Muslim Crimean Tatars abandon their homes, farms, and animals to move thousands of kilometers away. However, the Tatars were able to preserve their culture, location, and religion by teaching it to their children. This singular practice made it possible for them to move back to their home several decades later with their culture and religion intact. The return of the Tatars. The Crimean Tatars started moving back home to Crimea in 1989, following several reforms made by Mikhail Gorbachev, the reigning Soviet leader. Following the split, Crimea became a semi-autonomous part of the newly minted Ukrainian Republic. By 1991, at the complete collapse of the Soviet Union, hundreds of thousands of Crimean Tatars had moved back to their home in Crimea. The return of the Crimean Tatars continued for several years after, and by the turn of the 21st century, a sufficient number of them were back home. Relationship with other Muslims. The Crimean Tatars formed a cordial relationship with the closest Muslim empire, the Ottoman Empire, modern-day Turkey. The ruler of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th century, Sultan Selim I, married a princess from the Crimean Tatar royal house. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, who succeeded Sultan Selim I as ruler of the Ottoman Empire, also married Harem Sultan, popularly known as Roxolana from Ukraine. Although Roxolana hailed from a Ruthenian city of Ruhatyn in western Ukraine, she was taken to Crimea during a raid of town by the Tatars. She was later taken to the Ottoman Empire, where she rose to the peak of power never before attained by any female in the Ottoman Empire. The Soleimani Mosque in Mariupol, Donetsk, in eastern Ukraine was built in their honor. Status of Muslims in 21st century Ukraine. The Crimea region was annexed once again by Russia in 2014. However, the region is only known as a Russian territory by Russia and Belarus, still recognized as an Ukrainian territory by the larger international community. Indeed, the Crimean Tatars form the majority of Muslims in Ukraine. They are not the only source of Muslims in the country. Turk-speaking tribes including Volga Tatars, Uzbeks, Azeris, and some North Caucasian ethnics who have been in Ukraine for centuries are other sources of Muslims in the country. Naturalized and immigrant Muslims migrated from the neighbor Muslim countries including Turkey, former USSR member states of Azerbaijan, Kosovo, Kazakhstan, and others. Today, Muslims make up 0.9 to 1.1% of the 44 million population of Ukraine. The eastern Donbas region, consisting of Donetsk and Luhansk, has a more significant ratio of Muslims, up to 6% of their population. Today, there are 116 mosques in Ukraine and several others under development. The Muslim community in Ukraine is growing like in every other place, but the current war, like every other war, is a clog in the wheel of any development. The Donbas region, which has the most Muslim population, is at the epicenter of this war. May Allah protect and ease the affairs of the Ummah there and in other parts of Ukraine, and grant a speedy resolution to this current war.